Whew. Hello, everybody. My name is Andrew Mills, and welcome to my presentation on MATLAB, the language of technical computing. Now, I have filmed this video so many times before. I have been interrupted by dogs, by children. Um, One time I recorded it perfectly, no interruptions, no stutter, no anything, only to find out at the very end that I forgot to turn the microphone on, so you couldn't hear me. So, fingers crossed that this take goes well, or I might just rip my hair out. So, here we go, MATLAB. Are you a mathematician, or are you a scientist, or are you a professor? Then you should be using, drumroll please, MATLAB. Ta-da! So what exactly is MATLAB? I know that's what you're wondering. So with MATLAB you can make really cool things like that, or if you prefer rectangles, you can make a graph that looks like that, or you can make a 2D graph, or if you prefer 2D graphs with a bunch of lines, you can make that. You can make Minnesota, or you can just make that whatever that thing is. But MATLAB started with these things, that are called matrices. And let me just tell you, people, matrices are some certified bad boys. Matrices can be tough. So what does matrices have to do with MATLAB? Well, you'll find out. To learn about MATLAB, first we need to learn the history of MATLAB. So let's get started. It's the late 1970s and you are a professor at the University of New Mexico. And you are this person. And you're thinking, who's that guy? And I'm saying, that's Cleve Moeller, duh. And you're thinking, who's Cleve Moeller? And I'm saying, that's the guy who made MATLAB. And you're thinking, oh, okay. So let's talk about Cleve Moeller. That's Cleve Moeller right there on the right. So Cleve Moeller was a professor at the University of New Mexico. He was teaching linear algebra and numerical analysis. So he wanted his students to have access to these things called LinPack and IcePack. Now, LinPack and IcePack are both these software libraries that can help the user solve matrix problems. Remember, I was just talking about matrices. The problem with LinPack and IcePack is that they are on Fortran, which is a programming language. So unless you did not know Fortran, you couldn't really use LinPack or IcePack. So Cleve Moeller saw this as a problem, so he thought, I need to do something for my students that don't know Fortran where they can use LinPack and IcePack to help them solve matrices. So we already talked about that. So he began working on this calculator and he started programming it on Fortran, and this ended up becoming MATLAB, which is short for Matrix Laboratory. Kind of just mashed those two words together. So he started MATLAB, working on MATLAB in the late 1970s, so his students could have easy access to a calculator that could solve matrices. He started with his students in mind, and he never intended on releasing it for commercial use at first. It really was just his hobby too at the beginning. So he never really saw that MATLAB would be as big as it is today. So what happens next? So Cleve Moeller, he spends the 1979 and 1980 academic school year at Stanford University, and he introduces his students to MATLAB. He's teaching numerical analysis. So his students that are taking his numerical analysis class, they see that MATLAB is a very handy-dandy tool. So they start using it in their other classes to help them with their homework, projects, assignments in general. And they also started telling their friends about it. So you have, like I said, they're using it for other classes. They're talking to their friends about it. Hey, have you heard about MATLAB? And then it reaches this guy. And you're thinking, who's this guy? And I'm saying, that's Jack Little, duh. And you're thinking, well, who's Jack Little? Now, Jack Little is the co-founder of MathWorks, and we're going to talk about MathWorks really soon, so hang tight. So Jack Little was a graduate engineering student at Stanford University while Cleve Moeller was teaching there. And a friend of Jack's told him about MATLAB, and it completely changed his life forever. So he heard about MATLAB. He thought it was such a good idea. This is so useful. We need to take this to the next level. What is the full potential of this matrix laboratory, MATLAB? So in 1983, he approached Cleve Moeller with the idea to create a commercial product of MATLAB. And Cleve Moeller was pretty intrigued by this. He liked the sound of all that. So Little and his friend, Steve Bangor, they wrote an extended version of MATLAB in C. They added functions, toolboxes, and graphics, and which are some of the things that MATLAB is really known for today. So once Jack Little kind of comes in, him and his friend Steve, they start working on this programming language, and then all of a sudden MATLAB is way more than just a simple matrix calculator. Well, I shouldn't say simple, but more than just a matrix calculator. So PC MATLAB first made its debut in 1984, a year after he approached Cleve Moeller about it. So if it wasn't for Jack Little and Steve, MATLAB would look much different than it is today. Who's to say that MATLAB still wouldn't be just a matrix calculator? Or who's to say we wouldn't even know what MATLAB it is today at all? It could have never gone commercial. So together, Jack Little, Cleve Moeller, and Steve Bangor founded MathWorks, which is a corporation that specializes in the mathematical computing software. Sorry about that. So MathWorks, their major products include MATLAB and Simulink. So MathWorks is what produces MATLAB. So let's recap. We have these certified bad boys, matrices, and then this guy's students couldn't use IcePack and LenPack to solve them because they didn't know Fortran. So he created this, MATLAB, the language of technical computing. Then Jack Little heard about it. He wanted to get in on it. Him and his friend Steve took MATLAB to the new level by adding new functions, new features, into the programming language. And then boom, we have modern day MATLAB. So let's talk about that. Where does that leave us today? With modern day MATLAB. Let's talk about it. So modern day MATLAB is really cool. It is quite awesome. It has a large built-in database full of algorithms. It makes it easy to call in external libraries. It has fantastic image and video processing that is easy to get the hang of. That's one of the huge reasons MATLAB is used, is that feature right there. It makes it easy to do symbolic computations. It has biannual updates, so it's always updating. It's very easy to debug, unlike some other programming languages. It makes it very easy and simple to implement and test your algorithms. And it is perfectly crafted for engineers, mathematicians, professors, students, and any scientist. Now, I'm a mathematician who's a college student who is hoping to be a professor, so I think MATLAB's really interesting, and I can't wait to learn more about it. So let's talk more about it. So with MATLAB, what I think is personally the coolest thing you can do with it is making models, these really cool, colorful graphs. And as you can see here, they can be in 3D or they can be in 2D. and you can just make some really cool shapes. So let's talk about it. So here's an example of a 2D graph. It's really simple. You have your X value, you have your Y value, and then you have what looks to be a plot function. So in this example, it shows how MATLAB can produce a simple 2D sine graph. As you can see, it's a sine graph. Personally, I mean, I'm new to programming. I only know C and C++ at the moment, barely. Um, barely know C++ at the moment. But I mean, I don't know any other programming language you can make this stuff with at the moment, so that's pretty cool. Um, Here's an example of a 3D graph. You have capital X, capital Y equals mesh grid, and then you have three different points. Those are the X, Y, Z axis. Um, so with this one, it shows an examples of the surf function in the mesh grid display. So the surf function basically is just connecting these points together on the graph. And the mesh grid is mainly just like, the mesh grid display is just how it looks. It's like the style of look. You see, if you can see my cursor, it has those. It looks like mesh, basically. And don't worry, MATLAB can still solve matrices. So you see right here, solve the system of linear equations. And if you're familiar with linear algebra, you know that you can solve this by using a matrix. So you can still solve that using MATLAB, which is great because it didn't lose its roots. So MATLAB sounds a little too perfect. What's wrong with it? I was thinking this myself when I was first doing my research on MATLAB, and there's really one shortcoming. In this project, I was supposed to talk about multiple shortcomings, but really, upon my research, everyone really loves MATLAB. There's nothing too much to critique with it except dollars, euros, yuans, pounds, and rupees. It is crazy expensive. I mean, people, it is like ridiculously expensive MATLAB is. Unless you're using MATLAB for free at school or work, it's going to cost you upwards of $1,000. I mean, it is insanely expensive. I'm not too sure why it's that expensive. I think it's just because of all the really cool stuff I listed with it. You know, you have those biannual updates. You can use external libraries. You can do all types of cool stuff with it. I mean, you can even code in C in MATLAB. That's a thing you can do. So does that make it worth $1,000? I'm not really an expert, so I can't tell you if it's worth the price, but it seems really cool. Personally, is it worth it? Personally, with using common sense, unless you're getting it for free with school or work, I wouldn't get it unless you're going to be making profit in return. Like personally, I'm not just going to download MATLAB on my computer just to make really cool graphs if I'm not making money in return. I'm sure there's cheaper programming languages that you can do that. That won't be as good as MATLAB, but I mean, at least it's cheaper. So I wouldn't personally buy MATLAB unless you were going to make profit in return. I just think that's the smart choice. So let's recap. Once again, these certified bad boys. Then Cleve Moeller comes in and says, hey, my students need to solve these, but they can't use LinPack or IcePack because they don't know Fortran. Let's make MATLAB. This guy hears about it and says, hey, MATLAB's really, really cool. Let's commercialize it. He says, Cleve says yes. And now you can do this stuff. You still have the matrices solving linear equations. You still have, sorry, losing my train of thought. Those 3D, those 2D graphs. I mean, it's super cool. You can do all this stuff. MATLAB is just a really cool programming language. However, if you want to use MATLAB and you don't have like a way to get it for free or a very reduced cost through school or work, it's going to cost you these guys. It is so expensive. So let's oh, we're at the end of it. Here's my references. We have a bunch of websites, and I can put those two in the description of the video. So you can click on them and do your own research on MATLAB. So I hope you learned a lot about MATLAB, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you. Bye.